Good day to you, my dear students. Once again, I'm Sean Xavier Alcalita, and we're talking about the theory of justice. Okay, so justice is one of those things that people talk about all the time without really being specific about what they mean. Activists talk about economic justice, police and lawyers talk about criminal justice, parents, teachers, and students talk about justice a lot too. Though they may never use that word, when there's a fight on the playground or you get a grade you think you don't deserve, and we find ourselves talking about what's fair, and that's talking about justice. And we think we know what is, but we probably don't, or at least we don't agree. So, is justice about equality, fairness, getting what we deserve, or getting what we need? Sometimes we talk about balancing the scales of justice. This goes back to the ancient Greek understanding of justice as harmony. In this view, a just society is one in which everyone fulfills their roles so that society runs smoothly. In that case, violating your place in the social order, even if it is a place you don't want to hold, is considered unjust. Other times, justice has been understood in a more utilitarian way, where a just society is one that tries to increase the overall quality of life for its citizens. And for a political libertarian, a just society is simply one that allows its citizens to be maximally free. So, which is it? Is justice buying a meal for someone in need? Is it sending a criminal to jail? Is it doling out rewards and punishments based on merit? The real people talk about justice all the time. It's one of the most fundamental social, ethical, and moral principles we deal with every day. And in the end, what justice means to you personally pretty much defines how you think society should work. So you might have already noticed this, but when people talk about justice, a lot of time they're really talking about stuff. Like who has more stuff? Whether that's money, food, or access to services like healthcare and sanitation. Who gets to decide who gets what and on what basis? The area of moral philosophy that considers these questions is known as what we call it distributive justice. So, there are many different schools of thought here. For example, some people believe that everyone should get the same kind and amount of stuff no matter what. This concept of justice is what we call it as equality. It sounds totally fair, but is everyone getting the same stuff real justice? Because I need or I want different kinds and amounts of stuff than you do. So there's also the idea of need-based justice. This says everyone shouldn't get the same because our needs are not the same. By this logic, justice is getting based on what we need. Those who need more get more, and some say that this makes sense, while others argue that it amounts to favoring some people over others, putting those who happen not to be in the need at a disadvantage. So if that's how you look at things, then you probably espouse some kind of merit-based justice, which says that justice actually means giving unequally based on what each person deserves. And you deserve stuff or don't based on what you've done. So this view rewards hard work and punishes troublemakers. Finally, there is a very simple sounding approach advanced of 20th century American political philosopher in the name of John Rawls. That according to John Rawls, he argued that justice is fairness. So it means that any inequalities that exist in the social system, Rawls said, should favor the least well off because this levels the playing field of society. This is a form of need-based justice that focuses specifically on making sure that everyone is actually in a position to achieve their basic needs. Rawls reasoned that the world is full of natural inequalities. Think of all the things we talk about when we discuss moral luck. A lot of factors that will shape our life totally out of your control. So Rawls' sense of justice means correcting for those disadvantages that are beyond our control. Once again, there are some who argue that justice is fairness is actually unfair to those who have gotten the most, either through hard work or because they happen to win the life's natural lottery. So here, 20th century American philosopher Robert Nozick disagreed with Rawls' idea that justice is fairness. And to demonstrate why, he posed a thought experiment about professional basketball where he we explore on the next slide. Okay, so let us give an example from Robert Nozick, an example of an NBA superstar in the name of Will Chamberlain. Will Chamberlain is a wildly popular basketball player. When Nozick created this example, so Nozick said that what if Chamberlain, probably the most famous athlete of his day, decided that he'd only play under certain conditions? Suppose that Chamberlain decides that tickets for the games he play it should cost 25 cents more than the games he doesn't play in. And what's more, Chamberlain will be $100,000 more than the other players. Now, Chamberlain is really popular, so everyone knows that more people will show up to see a game he's playing in, even if the tickets costs more. Since he is a draw, isn't he entitled to ask for more than his teammates? Nozick argued that we can't and we should not try to even out the natural uneven playing field here. Sure, we start out with unequal amounts of stuff, but Nozick said we're each entitled to the stuff we have, provided we didn't steal it or otherwise obtain it unjustly. So, if you're the world's most famous basketball player, you are entitled to have and want more stuff, even if others don't have it. If Wilt Chamberlain's awesomeness at the basketball lets him amass a bunch of wealth while other people go hungry, well, that's not Wilt's fault. As you can see, there's a lot of disagreement about what it means to distribute justly. And this is an incredibly important topic because a lot of what we argue about politically has to do with exactly with this issue. So, people who believe that there are essential human rights, for example, argue that we simply entitled to have our most basic needs fulfilled. Things like having enough to eat and being able to go to the doctor when we are sick. But not everyone believes that it's a government's job to provide us with more things if we're not able to get them ourselves. Those people might argue that our rights are negative. A negative right is a right not to be interfered with, not to be stopped from pursuing the needs or the things that you need. So in this view, I can prevent you from trying to fulfill your needs, but I don't have to help you fulfill them either. By contrast, you might believe in positive rights. If you have a positive right to something, you're entitled to help getting it if you can get it yourself. So if you cannot afford a doctor, you have the right to get assistance in affording one. But notice that in this view, a right implies an obligation. Your rights in this case, a right to see a doctor, even if you cannot afford one, might make obligatory demands on me because I might end up helping to pay for it. Of course, someone like Robert Nozick would ask, where would such a right come from? How could I incur an obligation to help you just because I'm better off than you are? Sure, it might be nice if I help, but it is certainly not a duty and not one, and no one should compel me to do it. But that's what exactly when a government does, when it takes taxes from those who have more in order to assist those who have less. So you see what I mean? When people talk about taxes and healthcare and income inequally, they're really talking about justice. But of course, a lot of time, justice is not all about stuff. It is all about punishment. Like most subjects, philosophers disagree about the most appropriate way to respond to wrongdoing. One concept known is what we call it as retributive justice. This holds that the only way for justice to be satisfied is for a wrongdoer to suffer in a proportion to the way he's made others suffer. This is your good old-fashioned biblical eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth justice. In this view, justice is supposed to hurt. That's the only way to make things right. Historically, this would mean things like if you caused physical harm to someone, your punisher must do the same thing to you. Today, in the interest of being civilized, we tend to mete out the pain in terms of incarceration and fines, rather than straight up tit for tat, but still just a retribution, is one of the driving philosophical forces behind capital punishment, the idea that there's simply no way of right the wrong of taking the life of the other than by taking the life of the life taker. But utilitarians have other theories of punishment rather than making wrongdoers suffer for the suffering's sake. Like these thinkers favor what's known as welfare maximization. In this view, there is no good to be found in vindictively causing pain to wrongdoers, but some form of pain is still in order. So one option is what we call it as rehabilitation. Here the approach is to give wrongdoers help so they can learn to get along in a society and follow its rules. The focus is often on education if needed, therapy, what we call it is therapy, education and also therapy. This is also criticized as being paternalistic because it carries with it the assumption that wrongdoers are in need of our help, that they don't know any better, and that they need to be cured of some social disease. Another approach to just punishment is what we call it as deterrence. For eons, people have assumed that punishment prevents wrongdoers from committing further crimes, while others discouraging others from breaking the rules. So rather than making a wrongdoer suffer for what they have done, supporters of deterrence see punishment as being for the good of society as a whole. Sometimes we punish people to send a message to other people. One more approach to just punishment is the concept of restorative justice. Here, the focus is making amends rather than on making the wrongdoers suffer. So if you make a mess, you have to clean it up. And if you hurt someone you need to take steps to try and to make it right. This is the logic behind assigning community service. So if you make a mess, you have to clean it up. And if you hurt someone, you need to take steps to try and make it right. This is the logic behind assigning community service to offenders. The hope here is that the right approach to wrongdoing will lead to healing and growth, both for the wrongdoer and the wronged. It's all about restoration and forgiveness, basically the polar opposite of retributive approach. So take this advice. Give some thought to your own views on these topics because what you see as the right answer should shape the way you vote, how you spend your money, and how you punish your kids. You might discover that upon reflection, you should change the way you're doing some things. Like I said, everyone talks about justice, but before you can, you really have to decide what it means. Okay, so that's all for the theory of justice. So once again, I'm Sean Xavier Alquilita. Thank you very much.